Okay, so let's just jump right in. What if I told you we've been treating our most complex organ completely in the dark? It sounds crazy, right? But today, we're going to dive into a really revolutionary idea from Dr. Daniel Amen. It's an idea that came from looking at literally tens of thousands of brain scans to finally see what's actually going on inside our heads.
I mean, that is a huge claim, right? What single lesson from 83,000 brain scans could possibly be so important? Important enough to challenge a whole century of psychiatric practice? Well, the answer? It pretty much changes everything we thought we knew about mental health.
So to really get this revolution, you first have to get the guy behind it. See, Dr. Amen wasn't your typical by-the-book researcher. Nope. His own dad actually called him a maverick. And it was that independent, kind of rebellious spirit that led him to connect two worlds that at the time seemed totally separate.
In this timeline, it's really like watching a fascinating collision course in slow motion. You know, back in the 70s, he was an Army X-ray tech, and that's where he picked up this simple but powerful motto, how do you know unless you look? Then, a personal family crisis pushed him towards psychiatry. He wanted to heal not just people, but whole family trees. And then, boom, 1991. These two worlds collided, and honestly, that's where our story really kicks off.
Okay, so before we get to the big solution, we have to really understand the problem Dr. Amen saw. He fell in love with what psychiatry could do, but he was just horrified by its methods. He felt like the entire field was basically working with one hand tied behind its back.
And this question just nails the core issue. Seriously, think about it for a second. If you have a heart problem, what happens? The doctor looks, right? They run an EKG. If you break a bone, they take an X-ray. But for the single most complex organ in the entire body, our brain, the standard approach has always been completely different.
Yeah, this comparison makes it so clear. Cardiologists, they look. Neurologists, they look. Orthopedic doctors, you guessed it, they look. But for decades, psychiatrists have been the odd one out, relying on just talking to patients and observing their symptoms to figure out what's wrong. In other words, they've been guessing.
And you know, this wasn't just some academic debate for him. Those are his own words, describing what it felt like to treat patients without any real data. Imagine that, prescribing powerful medications without actually seeing the organ you're trying to affect. He said it felt like a dangerous game of chance, and it terrified him. He just knew there had to be a better way.
So, okay, if the big problem was practicing in the dark, what's the solution? Well, it's pretty simple, really. You turn on the lights. And for Dr. Amen, that light came from a technology called SPECT imaging. All right, let's break this down because it's super important. SPECT isn't like an MRI that just shows you the brain's anatomy, its structure. Nope. SPECT is all about function. It shows you how the brain is working. Think of it like a weather map for your brain, showing which areas have good activity, which are way too quiet, and which are working way too hard.
Okay, so to understand what a troubled brain looks like, we first need to know what a healthy one looks like. This right here, this is our baseline, a healthy, active brain on a SPECT scan. And what you're looking for is that full, even, symmetrical activity. The color doesn't really matter, it's all about that smooth, consistent shape.
Now, let's see what happens when things go wrong. After a stroke, you can literally see these holes. Those are areas where blood flow has just stopped. It's not a guess, it's a clear, visible injury.
Or take Alzheimer's. The deterioration typically shows up in the back half of the brain. And here's the part that's absolutely staggering. They can see these changes on a scan 30, even 50 years before a person starts showing any symptoms. Just wow.
And with something like drug abuse, the damage is just as obvious. The argument just isn't abstract anymore. You can see the physical toll. And all of a sudden, these things we've always called invisible illnesses, well, they're not so invisible anymore.
So Dr. Amen just started scanning his patients, all of them. And as the years went by, the data just grew and grew into this massive library of brain function, all tied to human behavior. And that led to some discoveries that didn't just tweak the old rules, they completely rewrote the playbook.
And the scale here is just, it's everything. We're not talking about some small little study with a dozen people. We're talking about the world's largest database of its kind. Scans from patients in 93 different countries. It's that sheer volume of data that allowed these clear, undeniable patterns to just pop right out.
And out of all that data, 3 huge lessons in particular really stood out. First, mental illnesses like depression or ADD aren't just one single thing. They can have many different causes in the brain. Second, mild traumatic brain injury,
that minor concussion you got playing sports, is a major and massively overlooked cause of psychiatric problems. And third, and this one is so important, troubled brains, even the brains of criminals, can often be rehabilitated.
Okay, this slide right here shows you exactly why this is a game changer. Look at this. We've got two patients, both diagnosed with major depression. They have the exact same symptoms, but look at their brains. They are polar opposites. One is super underactive and the other is way overactive. Now, if you give them the same treatment, it's a total shot in the dark. One might get better, but the other could get so much worse. This is exactly why looking matters more than just guessing.
So all of this work, all 83,000 of those scans, it all funneled down to one single, profound, and unbelievably hopeful conclusion. Really, this is the most important lesson of the whole thing. Here it is. This is the brain changer, the single most important lesson. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better. Those struggles, that damage, those unhealthy patterns, they are not a life sentence. With the right, targeted help, you can physically change your brain for the better. And the best part? They have the scans to prove it. And listen, this isn't just some feel-good theory. They have hard evidence. Dr. Amen's group did this landmark study on former NFL players, guys with pretty significant brain damage, and after they went through a BrainSmart rehab program, an incredible 80% of them showed real, measurable improvement in blood flow, in their memory, and in their mood. That's not just a theory, that's damage reversal, right there in action.
But, as powerful as the data is, the most powerful proof always comes from the individual stories. So I want you to meet Andrew. When he was 9 years old, he was dangerously violent. He attacked a little girl on a baseball field for no reason. He was deeply, deeply troubled, drawing pictures of himself hanging from a tree. He was, in Dr. Amen's own words, a potential mass shooter in the making.
Now, a traditional psychiatrist probably would have put him on medication, labeled him with a disorder, but Dr. Amen insisted on looking. And the scan revealed the real problem. There was a cyst, the size of a golf ball, just sitting there. No amount of therapy or medication could ever fix that. But once surgeons removed it, the violent behavior, it just vanished. He went back to being the sweet, loving kid he was always meant to be. That is the power of looking instead of guessing.
Andrew's story is just incredible, right? But the implications, they're even bigger. It suggests a whole new future for how we approach not just mental health, but maybe even society's most complex problems too.
And really, this is the ultimate takeaway. When you have the chance to change someone's brain for the better, you're not just helping one person, you're changing their future, and the future of everyone they touch. Think about it. By healing Andrew's brain, they didn't just save one boy. They changed the entire trajectory for his future family. Now he can grow up to be a loving husband, a great father. The health of one single brain can literally ripple through generations.
So that leaves us with this final, really powerful question. If we can rehabilitate troubled brains instead of just locking them away, if we can find the real physical cause of suffering instead of just covering up the symptoms, if we can truly actually change one person's brain, what are the limits? If you can change one brain, can you change the world?